All right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 19 of the StarCraft 2 Weekly Whine Live. I'm your host, Ace, and today I am joined by Nelson and Harokku. Say hello, everyone. I'll give you a chance to plug any channels you got. Introduce yourselves a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Yeah. I'm Nelson. I'm from the UK, as you can probably tell by the voice, and I am a disgruntled Protoss player since the patch, but I'm sure we can have a more constructive conversation about it tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hello. I am Harokku. I'm a French Zerg player. Been playing since 2018. StarCraft was my first RTS. And after the patch, I had fun. And after more of the patch, I had so little fun that I started playing any other game possible.
Understandable.
So I am here for more discussion, and I'll come back to StarCraft once I am in a better place because the last 2 years have been very bad for me.
Yeah, I can understand that feeling as a fellow Zerg player myself. And I guess I'll also just give a little bit of MMR range here,
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like 4K right now. I think I'm floating between like 4100 and 4200 somewhere around there right now. Harokku?
Yeah, I have been around. I shot up to like 3K on my first year playing very quickly, like 345 pretty fast, and then I was like too bored to actually get good, so I just played funny things until I got around 4500, and then I went a little back down. I peaked like last year, and so right now if I would play, I would be floating around, I would say, like, yeah, 42, 43, like barely above your level, but like not really.
Yep. And Nelson?
Yeah, so I mean, I played since 2023. Started playing Protoss in Gold League, climbed over the next sort of like 2 years or so, 2-3 years, to about 4.2k, mid 4.2, so just below Masters League, and that was pretty much immediately before the balance patch, and then after the balance patch dropped a bit of MMR, but have managed to climb back to about 4k, and I think that's probably about where I sit at the moment.
Cool. And I see we have a Zesty, a wild Zesty has appeared.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm gonna turn you up a little bit here. Glad to have you here. I hope you're... Oh, you are free now. Cool. Yeah, I was looking at the DMs here. Okay, cool. Yeah, great to have you here. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to get you in here because for anyone who doesn't know, Zesty is a GM, Ladder Legends coach, and was helping with Pig and his PvZ Gateway Man build the other day. I saw that and I thought that was really interesting, so I thought that because that's what we want to talk about today, it'd be pretty cool to have you on, so I'm glad you're able to make it.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. I'm able to be here.
Awesome. Cool. So to get things started here, just as I always do, I just got to give my disclaimer here. I set this up because I always enjoy like open and honest conversations about balance, but I feel like sometimes it's a little bit hard to find in the community. So I hope to do my small part to change that with the show. If you enjoy, give a like or subscribe. And right now, we're talking about the PvZ Gateway Style here. And, there's been a lot of debate about the Gateway redesign and whether the new like fast gates or whatever you want to call them are even viable, or how you're supposed to use them and how this affects Protoss. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into that. There's a lot of people talking about it. So I just want to kind of start by saying that I personally believe that like Protoss was far too strong on previous patches, but at the same time, like, I don't want Protoss players to feel miserable playing Protoss. And I think that's really like the core of what this comes down to, because I think there was probably a lot of people who were happy to see the warp gate get nerfed and for Protoss to have like a whole bunch of options removed because they felt like Protoss was too strong. And I think the part of this that we're kind of ignoring is like, the race needs to be fun. Like people need to have fun playing the race. And I can really sympathize with this as a Zerg player because I've been complaining about this for a very long time. And I have a little bit of something I wanted to show here, which is this thread from a year ago that I posted, and it's titled Zerg has been less and less fun since 2018. And it's like a full like page and a half write-up about everything that's wrong with Zerg and why it's not fun. And this got like 110 upvotes a year ago, right? And then we also have a few videos from RTS Storyteller. And these are from like 6 months ago. There's a couple from different months, right? They've got like 900 likes, and he's talking about the struggles with Zerg and not like a balance problem, but like why it just doesn't feel fun to play. So I wanted to kind of start with that because I think it's important to distinguish between Protoss needs to get nerfed and Protoss like being fun to play. Do you get what I'm saying? Like I think the race still needs to be fun, and we need to pay attention to Protoss players when they're saying like, "Hey, I don't want to play this," like because it's not just balance that we're talking about. So I'll shut up and give you guys a chance to jump in here. I don't know who has any thoughts here on this.
I think we can start the discussion with, we don't want Protoss to have the same fate as Zerg.
Yes.
Where Zerg was broken, and every time anything was good about Zerg, it was like, okay, fuck off, remove it, and then point, oh, but Serral still wins, so it's fine. Oh, but the Rogue still wins, so it's fine. Oh, but the Rainer still wins, so it's fine.
Yep.
We should just, the goal of make game fun should be priority. And it doesn't really matter which race dominates, in my opinion, as long as it's not like 8 of the same faction in the top 8 of every tournament ever. But it's fine if your best player is one race. Like, are they gonna nerf Terran in Brood War because Flash wins everything? Or the last 10 years, Zerg wins everything? No, I mean, they can't, but like, they are gonna make maps that like, boost the other guys, but they don't want to make the game not fun. When something is stupid and unfun, they still try to like move the map around. So I think, we should. Is mass warp gate stupid, and is Protoss going 2-base defense into 100 Nexus, 1 million gateways, spamming Zealot at a Terran for an hour fun? It's fun for 2 games, but afterwards you're Protoss and you're bored because like, if I don't get away with it, I lose to Terran late game, so I have to play like this. And then the Terran has to camp for 40 minutes, so he also hates the game. And the solution shouldn't be fuck warp gates, you get nothing. The solution should be, what is fun about Protoss, boost those things, and bring down stuff that feels unfair.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Of course, easier to say than to do, obviously.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. Like, I know we're talking about PvZ, but we can kind of link onto PvT a bit in the sense that PvT is very lacking for options. Like we saw in the previous meta, Terrans were essentially focusing a lot of their strategy around 2-base all-ins or 2-base builds, either with SCV pools or without. And as a Protoss player, I felt like I played the same game 100 times this season, where every time I saw a Terran, I knew what was going to happen. I was going to get hit with a Reaper Hellion or some kind of Cyclone at around 4 or 5 minutes-ish. And at about 7 to 8 minutes, they're going to come across the map with either tanks, mines, bio, some kind of upgrade, and maybe some SCVs. And then once I hold that, I'm going to take 6 bases, and I'm just going to absolutely run over them in the mid-game. Or they turtle, and they effectively get to a late-game army, and then there's not really much I can do about it, because my tools, for example, Storm, the range of it got a little bit more difficult to use against ghosts because the cast range was less. Disruptors stopped one-hitting stuff, so they didn't one-hit ghosts anymore. They didn't have one-hit marauders. I personally think that was a good thing, but still, there was that sentiment of like options being taken away. So Terran players were doing what they thought was best, and Protoss players thought, were doing what they thought was best, and there wasn't really any other option. And the problem with that is that TOS was strong, and I will sit here and I will actually admit TOS was strong. It was too strong. But I also share Harokku's concerns that taking options away from players is not a way to go about it, and making the game less fun is definitely not a way to keep your really old game alive either.
Yeah. That's definitely like a major concern of this, is just the age of the game and the fact that, you know, we're shedding players faster than we're gaining players, you know.
Yeah.
And in that environment, it's like the risk of doing this sort of like massive change to a play style and expecting like the whole race to adapt, like that's kind of crazy.
And that's kind of evident in the statistics of, like, if you look at the percentage, so this is over the whole player base on every server, that everyone in StarCraft who plays ladder.
Oh, the no Napa stats. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the no Napa stats and non-API, however you say it, if you look at the overall player base, the percentage of Protoss players out of the whole player base is the lowest it's ever been since stats were recorded in November 2016. In Diamond, it's also the lowest it's ever been for quite a while. If you compare it to 2 seasons ago, like we're currently looking at 23% this season as opposed to 28% 2 seasons ago. So Protoss players are either leaving, not playing, or they're not playing as many games.
Yeah.
Especially in those mid leagues as well. GM is GM. It's, you know, that's a small sample size, but still, there is still a drop off of the amount of Protoss that are around in general.
Yeah.
And it's also important to say, because people are going to say the patch is why people left the game. If you look at the overall trend over the last couple of years, we're steadily losing players, and the patch gave us a tiny boost up before going back down steadily again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, screw it. I'm gonna show it. This is a chart that is like so scary that I like don't want to show it, but like we kind of have to acknowledge the truth.
I mean,
here,
it is what's happening.
So if you change chart mode to total, and you look at the total, and keep in mind these are seasons, and the season length is different, so it's a little bit hard to, you know, it's not like exactly linear in terms of time, because the difference between these, like you can see the seasons are evenly spaced, but that's not how it actually was in reality. There were like more months in some seasons and less in others, right? But I mean, the chart trend is pretty clear regardless. Like we're on a pretty clear downward trend here, and the recent numbers are a little bit scary, you know. We're like, I mean, we're looking at GM here, but if we look at all, like, you'll see the same trend. Yeah, it's not a good state that StarCraft is in right now, so it's already kind of we're at a bit of a risky place for StarCraft, so it feels weird to make such a radical change to Protoss right now. Anyway, so I mean, I guess I should just ask, how do you guys feel about them overall? Like, have you used them at all? Do they feel viable? Are they viable at the pro level, do you think? You know, when do you transform the warp gates now? That kind of stuff. I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are.
I mean, I can talk about PvZ because I know we were talking about the gateways and PvZ in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a funny change because the way that production is in ZV in when you play against Zerg is different to when you play against Terran, in the sense that like the regular gateways are good if you want to consistently produce units, and like you don't want to choose when you produce the units, you just print out units essentially, which like is pretty good if you're playing charge or blink styles. So particularly, you know, earlier in the game against Zerg, but also most of the game against Terran. And I tend to keep my gateways for a long time against Terran because printing out, you know, 12 zealots at once consistently is fine against Terran. Like you can do that, but it tends to lose value quite quickly against Zerg. You want to be able to make like a High Templar on demand, or if you want to play an aggressive build like a DT drop, you want to be able to warp in those GTs closer to your opponent's base, and you also want your opponent to not be able to like see stuff coming out of the gateway as well. So it's a weird choice, and I don't think we figured out which one's better or which one's worse. And I don't think we're gonna figure it out for quite a while either.
I tend to agree. I think what this change has made me realize is how broken front-loaded production is.
It's
and
powerful.
what I mean is, you get the units and then you pay the cooldown instead of every single other unit in the entire game being, you pay the unit and you wait until you get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about it has to move, like walk around or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you just instantly get the units is so strong for a race that's not very good, like both bad mobility wise defensively compared to Zerg on creep, which is extremely fast, and has very bad defensive siege abilities. Like you're not Terran, which can with Mule basically overmine his positions and make 3 base feel like 3.5 or 4 base. So you have less territory to defend, plus you have good siege units. You're in a race that kind of wants to expand heavily, aggressively, especially against Terran. But to a certain extent, against Zerg, you're trying to keep up if you can, or you need to put on extreme pressure, which is less possible because in StarCraft 2, the Queen happens to exist. So you have this race who kind of wants to aggressively expand, but has to wall, has to overpay static defense, etc. So not having the ability to put a unit wherever you want, almost whenever you want, is such a big cost that it's so hard to make it worth not having this ability for Protoss. And it's either they have to play 2 base builds and build up pushes, or they have to aggressively expand with like a Stargate as cover, and then camp the 3 base and make a huge push and then timing. But both of those styles feel bad to play. I feel like to play against, especially play against, in my opinion. I think that's the most frustrating type of style for me to play against is stuff like Atrax, 2 base all-in, Terran, Protoss, Zerg. Like the type of build where it's like pretend you're doing harassment, but you don't really care because you're shoving everything into eco, making a big army and just YOLO, and then you call it macro, which is still another problem. But I think that's extremely frustrating, and the fact that Protoss can make this giant army on 3 base, and for Zerg, if you don't have high-tech siege units, it's almost impossible to hold or win in the long run, because you could technically make like 50 banelings, but that only works for 1 wave. I think that feels awful, and PvZ or StarCraft is at its best when you're asymmetrically attacking each other, harassing each other, and taking risks on technology, on expanding, etc. I think most people would prefer watching a early battle toss meta where Protoss is weirdly aggressively expanding, but has no tech, so if they have to transition to Storm somewhere, and the Zerg is pressuring with Lings, and then transitioning to maybe a Roach style that's more conservative, or they take a risk, they go for a Spire, or they even skip Roach and they rush to Hydra to punish the no AoE. Like, those types of game I feel like are way more interesting to play and watch because you have multiple choices and multiple small interaction than I wait for them to make big army, I can't really punish it, and then I hope I hold the one timing 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
The data are also kind of like it is also supporting, in a sense, what Harokku is saying as well, because there's a on the notes that I sent through. There's the graph of the win rate, so it's
I
the
see 2 pulse.
distribution
Yeah, I know what you're talking
by
about.
game
By
duration.
time, by timestamps.
Yeah,
Yep.
and if you so we look at when the graph goes up, that means Zerg wins more. When the graph goes down, it means Zerg wins less. And like that red line is where is the 50% line. So between up until about sort of 5 to 6 minutes is when Zerg is very dominant in DVP. I think probably just due to a lack of brass. not being able to understand how to deal with a lot of the new Zerg early game aggression, and I think that will probably level out as we go along in time.
I think it's fine to have. That's what makes StarCraft cool. Is
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like one race is gonna have the advantage in the early game, then the mid game, and then it should shifts back and forth, and that tends to you hope that it evens out in the ultra late game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ideal game would be one race has the advantage in the early game, then it shifts to mid game, then the late game, maybe the early lead game is better for one, for the other it goes back up, and then it evens out in the ultra. That's ideal situation. But yeah, you can see it clearly that basically Zerg on this, you see Zerg has early game cheese. Then it evens out when Protoss has timings, but it will feel like the 6-minute timings are struggling now because we don't have warp kit, as you said, for like DT builds, charge lot, very aggressive blink type of builds. They're very committed and they tend to not work. And then Zerg is good in the like 4 base pre-hive timing, where they go like especially Hydra timing. I'm assuming this is Hydra timing. And then you have the 12-minute plus,
timing.
which is
it might be Hydra Bane.
No, Lurkers is 12 plus.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably.
I think 9 is more the like 80 drones, Hydra Bane, YOLO type of timings. And then afterwards, it's Mothership is out, you have Storm, and Zerg gives up. Most Zergs are going to give up, and the 10% who actually try to play the matchup, they can't do it because you're not 7,000 MMR.
Yeah.
Or you try to pretend you can do it, and you can barely do it, and maybe you will win if they forgot Immortals are a unit and you made 12 Ultras. But yeah, afterward, it's kind of like Protoss domination, quote unquote, because it is so difficult to stop a death ball.
Yep,
exactly. Yeah,
it's
not the type of game that we want to
24 minutes, but you can see like this is the other chart, and this is why I also isolated this to ZVP. Like this is the number of games that actually end at each time, right? So you can see like
most games
here's the point
ended.
where Protoss advantage really kicks in, like 12-15 minutes, right? And then we go to 12-15 minutes and like less and less games are ending around here, right? But where this gets really interesting is the tail for PvZ, where Zerg like spikes in the ultra late game, but those games are like
the
so
advantage
rare.
of the game has way less gas now, and Zerg minerals goes a longer way because you can spam queens and it can keep let's say you're in like a true end game bind out situation, you have almost no gas. Protoss with no gas has no AoE, no way to have a true air threat, and probably you're on a weird ground army that gets outscaled by, if the Zerg has some gas unit, it's going to have a couple Broodlords, maybe a couple Ultras, a ton of Zerglings, which at maxed upgrade will fuck Zealots over like so hard.
Yep.
And even though you have war static defense, if you have a couple Broods, you will just grind it down, and then you have 20 Queens, so your Broodlord should never die.
Spores are
so
also mobile.
In mass like super late game, mine out type of games, Zerg should have quite a bit of an advantage.
I'm gonna have to cut in there.
What was that?
The late. I think that's entirely wrong. So I'm gonna have to correct the record on that. In a mined out scenario, the Protoss should have the advantage because Oracle Revelation and Tempest is like over static defense is unmatched in terms of ability to be efficient.
I mean, it should work, but it's not showing that it works.
That's because like practically speaking, games like are actually decided. Like one side, it's not like you're going into the super late game and like both sides are even. At some point, through the entire game, one side is winning and one side is losing, like small wins and small losses, either way. And so like, it could be that like Zergs are going into the super late game with advantages, right? And so therefore, then they're able to convert they're eventually able to win because they have had advantage. Like they've been building an advantage, and maybe it's easier for Zerg to build an advantage. I'm not sure. I'm not arguing that, but just from the purely theoretical sense, if you have like a maxed out army and a maxed out army, and nothing has happened, everything's even. Like in the purely theoretical sense, the Protoss has we didn't even talk about Mothership, right? So just from a purely theoretic standpoint, the Protoss army is massively favored in a
but
late game scenario.
I would agree with that, but the state of how the matchups is played when you camp and you go late game right now, Zerg is playing extremely aggressive with Ultralisk and a lot of multitask, and it tends to slowly grind an advantage that when the Binite happens and you're on low amount of gas units, you get outscaled as the Protoss gets outscaled. Like if all you have is a giant mineral bank, I feel Zerg overall, like over time, will win.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
I suppose by getting
no worries, go ahead.
That's like only the
I would
only
just
way I
say
can
that, like,
explain
if all
that
you have is-
little spike at the end.
if all you have is a giant mineral bank, but like both sides, like neither side is going to be happy if they only have minerals, right? Whichever side has more gas at the end is going to be the side that's winning and going to win the game. Assuming that they don't actually run out of minerals, which is a play, because you have to remake, as Protoss, you have to remake static defense as the Zerg just tears down static defense on the opposite side of the map of the Death Ball. And so a win condition for the Zerg is to have the Protoss player run out of minerals, because they can't actually afford to keep recreating the static defense. That's like one of the grinding win conditions. So I guess the point that I'm making is that I think that like if we're looking at like the theoretics there, the Protoss is favored, and it's perhaps harder to play, harder to stabilize, because it's hard for a Zerg. Zergs don't understand how to play the late game a lot of times, which is why they won't. They just lose to, as soon as you get to this Death Ball, then they'll just bash their army against the Death Ball and they'll lose. Ultimately, what the Zerg has to do is they have to have 5 or 6 army hotkeys, and one of them needs to be attacking, 4 of the army hotkeys have to be like controlling the main fight and the main armies, and then another army hotkey needs to be constantly counterattacking and constantly applying pressure on the other side of the map, which the Protoss has a very hard time dealing with, of course. But it's also hard to do this, and it's very easy to lose that army over and over again and to get punished. So both sides, when you're playing a late game scenario, both sides have a lot of very, very hard tasks in order to balance. And I would say on ladder, it's clear that most ladder Zergs have not built the skill or ability to like play that like late game army style. And in fact, most Protosses in the world haven't. That's why Cyril wins late game ZBP like almost unmatched, because most Protosses in the world have not built the skill to the level that Cyril has. Now it's questionable whether or not which one's harder or easier, but then there is a skill after that, which is clear, which is there's a defense. If any time in an RTS a side is attacking, the side that is defending has the inherent advantage from a theoretical standpoint, right? Defender's advantage is always a thing. Rallies are closer. Just the fact that you have less ground to cover with your movements is always going to be a thing. So anytime a side is attacking, theoretically the other side is losing. Or the side that's attacking is losing, and the side that is defending has the theoretic win, but they may not be able to convert that win. And so from that perspective, I would just say that like late game PvZ has to be Protoss favored, but the execution of it has yet to be realized in terms of like a way where you could actually see Protoss consistently winning the late game, unless the Zerg shows that they have not built the skill to build the necessary army composition. Right. I don't know if that made sense. I haven't really talked about like.
No, I kind of agree on that. So another way to view why there's a spike in the ultra late game is that Zergs who actually follow the game plan properly are few, but they are much better than their Protoss counterpart, because the Protoss counterparts legitimately don't get the practice, because usually they just wait and then the Zergs just bashes their head into the dev ball at some point. So you get the win for free, quote unquote. And then if you're against an actual Zerg who's patient and is going to run by you to death, then you're confused and you just get you get blown up. But it only happens in games that are longer than 30 minutes.
Yep, exactly. And it also kind of assumes like a Zerg has a hard time building the skill of that, because they don't get in those games very often either. Oftentimes
it's very hard to force late game as a Zerg, in my opinion, much harder than Protoss. But like, whoever has the initiative in the mid late game can force a late game, and it's rarely Zerg.
It's interesting as I'm as you guys are talking here. I'm kind of going through the stats on It just because we were looking at Masters 1 and GM stats earlier. So I'm just kind of going through and I'm looking at like at different levels. Is it the same
Diamond,
pattern?
yeah. I saw you checking Diamond 1 where like it evens out in the late game, and then Platinum, and it's like
this is Plat 1.
Cheese is broken, and then Protoss can't win.
Yeah. Like in the early game in Plat 1, it's just like Zerg domination. Like his Protoss can't wall. You know what I mean?
How high is the graph? It's something stupid, right?
I can't even select
it's like
this
85%. It's like 80%, no?
Yeah, it must be like 80% or something. It's got to be like right here.
Platinum as a Zerg. Just get a good Ling Rush. There you go.
Yep.
You can see it. You can see Protoss struggling at this lower MMR where like they don't have the basics down of like getting the safety air unit, walling, etc. And responding to cheese. They just get obliterated at almost every single.
I mean,
like,
same problem for
of the game.
Terrans too. You know, like any Terran or Protoss playing like below like Diamond or whatever, like it's to the point where like if you struggle to like make your wall and like defend your wall when it's under attack and like it's being pressured by the Zerg, like that's the level where Zerg is just fucking so OP. You know what I mean? Like I can understand why people at that level might feel like Zerg is super strong because I mean,
I think
the mechanic of walling and versus Zerglings, it's just so much power there.
Winter had a thing with that where like he would say some raids get like an MMR for free and it's breaking above that's hard. And it's like Zerg get Platinum for free because people don't wall.
Yeah, basically.
And then going above that is like actually learning how to defend properly and not making 50 Zerglings for no reason. Yeah. And then Protoss gets gold for free, and then they learn how to wall, and they just shoot past it.
Like if you look at Gold 1 for ZVP, it's entirely Zerg favored until like 24 minutes in the game, which is crazy.
The thing is, the curve we're talking about is the same almost everywhere. You have the win early game, then it almost evens out with Protoss taking advantage around 6 minutes, which is like the first actual Protoss pressure. And then it goes back up for Zerg, and then it goes back down.
Yeah, like the spikes are the same, but they're just like balanced differently. They're like different extremity levels at the different leagues.
I guess to kind of bring it back to some things people were saying earlier, one question that I would kind of push back on, or like the idea that like the game needs to be like fun, there needs to be fun mechanics, and like the issue I have with that is a very, very subjective like measurement. Like, what would you say to the gold player that goes, "Oh, look, I understand that you say that it's easy to stop link run bias by making a wall, but that's just not very fun for me. I don't think it's fun to make a wall, and I don't think the game should force me to make a wall because that's not fun." How do you like combat that? But like that argument, or should you? Or do you think that argument is like do you think that's a legitimate argument?
I think that's a great point to bring up. I think I would say like, you know, you could definitely like, because fun is subjective, right? But the thing is, it's not entirely subjective because like there's a lot of research into these kind of things, and because you know it's a very interesting topic for psychology and things like that. So I think that if you really look into this, you know, I think that there's a science behind when interactions are interesting and fun and dynamic, you know, and like these are the things that like we recognize and describe as fun, but they're like, it's such an intricate like interplay of different elements that it's hard for us to like pinpoint this and be like, you know, I enjoy this counterplay between this and that and the other thing. You know, like that's a little bit abstract and like difficult for people to wrap their head around, and it's wordy. So it's much easier to just say like, I like this, it's fun. You know what I mean? But like as a consequence, like we don't really understand like what makes us enjoy something very well. But I think that there is a fundamental science behind these kind of things, and we could actually like look into this kind of stuff and eliminate some of the bias.
If I would rephrase my make game fun argument, I would say make interaction rewarding. In not as people have to play against each other. I mean, doing thing should be rewarding. Doing things well should be rewarding. Like if I inject well, I'm playing solo, but it's rewarding. If something like creep spreading properly can be rewarding, even if it's a busy work. And on the other extreme of that, there's like mutamicro. Is rewarding when you like clump properly to like not lose them. You spread at the last second to not lose to a mine, stuff like this. That's like direct interaction. But so I think overall we should like boost or push the type of interaction that are rewarding for ideally both sides. So ideally, but stuff that's like too one-sided should be almost avoided as much as possible, unless completely necessary, or removed. So stuff
So
like
what makes like
poking,
creep spreading? What makes creep spreading like rewarding in your mind? And like why
so
is
creep
that
spreading
different
well
than-
is
than-
rewarding.
I don't mind
Then-
coming in a second.
or injecting? Actually, I'll use a better one. What makes injecting rewarding, and how is that different than like the like for instance chrono boosting?
So if you're injecting properly, it's something that's almost non-conscious. You're just clicking the thing, but your macro will feel smooth, and you'll feel your economy explode and your production explode. And I think if you've played Zerg a lot, you will feel when you can just hold down the button and you see all the eggs just explode into like just make a ton of units instantly, and you are never blocked because you are overloading properly. That feels like crack when you're actually doing
that is
properly.
the best fucking feeling. Like that's the thing that keeps me coming back to Zerg no matter what state it's in. You know, it's like I complain about, you know, oh, Zerg is terrible right now or whatever, but the feeling of like macroing perfectly, of like hitting that perfect cycle where you're like, oh man, I just spent all my money perfectly, all my larva's gone, I'm not supply blocked, I got injects ready to go, like, oh, it's so great.
I can tell you there's nothing that feels worse than holding down the button and either two things happens. All your money is you click all your lava and they're gone, and you had like 3, and then you look at your money and you have 1,000 in the bank and you feel terrible.
Yeah.
And the other extreme is you have 19 lava and 2,000, and you click and 2 lavas make an egg, and then it's like supply block. That's the two thing that will you smash your screen, because then you're like, okay, I'll just make 5 overload. Fuck my life.
Like when you're like on point with your macro cycle as Zerg, it feels really good, I think, because like when you're doing the production cycle, the game is giving you like really direct feedback that you have been playing well. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like if you're able to spend all your larva and it spends your money perfectly and you're not supply blocked, it's like, you know, you're doing everything right. You know, and that's just very rewarding.
And I'm gonna assume it's similar, or just the exact same, if Protoss is using gateways the same way. Like if you hit that like you hit like a, let's say like a Gladept build, which are pretty tight, lots of moving part type of build. But if you hit that 4 adepts moving out with a Warp Prism, and you deploy, and then you hit you hit that second warp in like on exactly on time, and no supply block happen, nothing happens, and then you have this 8 shades going out, and you can look at your timer and the timer says you did well. I think that must feel amazing. I know that feels amazing because I've seen Hearthstone a million times play that build and being like, ooh, good timing.
Yeah.
And just that alone means that like the macro mechanic, which all one player are, they're interactive, they're a fun interaction even for the solo player. Interaction feels rewarding because you're doing it well, and that works at every level.
These points are, I mean, there's research into video games, like what makes video games fun, but also what makes sport fun as well, like playing a sport in general. And a lot of that research like finds and centers around the feeling of like mastery, and like why do people play video games and why do they find video games fun? It's that feeling of mastery. And a lot of what's been described by, like, from a Zerg point of view, is you are basically mastering the macro in a sense. You get a sense of that you've done well, and you're rewarded for that. And that's what makes the game fun. It's that mastery, but also the success.
Yeah.
Like people like to experience success. They like to experience mastery, and I like the walling thing, for example. Like, if you don't want to play with a wall, that's absolutely fine. You can play that way. You're just not likely to experience a lot of success. So you're not likely. You might still have fun, but you're not likely to have fun because you will get ling rushed over and over again. So I completely understand the point of it. It's like we shouldn't balance the game about being fun because it's subjective, but research in that space tends to center around people enjoying video games because of a sense of mastery and because they get success from it. It's the reason why we all click the rank button and we feel great when we win and we feel shit when we lose. It's the same thing. And yes, we talk about like Minecraft, and Minecraft is fun, but it's not competitive. But that's because it's like a different type of game. And in competitive games and competitive sport, most people draw their fun from the feeling of mastery and when they experience success.
So
I would say winning or losing doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's
But
about that
that's
experience of success, not in the sense of winning or losing.
I think I would say, to my own hypothetical question, to this hypothetical gold player who doesn't want to build a wall because they don't think it's fun, I think I would say that, like, in my opinion, it's a personal problem of understanding. Like, they don't understand why the investment of the wall pays off and like makes the game more fun to them to play later, right? They can't conceptualize that is going to lead them to have more success. And to fix that problem, you know, at some point they kind of need to be forced to make a wall 50 games in a row, and they need to see how, oh, look, it holds off and it fixes something much. But like, ultimately, this isn't a problem of balance. It's not a problem of game design. It's a problem of the player's understanding of how applying this concept that they don't get and they don't understand and they don't see why it helps them, so therefore it's not fun. Helping them to experience doing it and therefore then reaping the results and the rewards. That would be kind of the way that I would approach that question. And so I guess a lot of pushback that I have right now is, and I'll give a little bit of the spicy takes that I've been holding back a little bit here. But one of the things we've all kind of, I won't say we have all, but like at least in this call, I think I've heard everyone kind of said, hey, Protoss was a bit too strong prior, on the 12 worker start in the last patch prior. Maybe there was a bit too much going on for Protoss that made it, maybe, even though why not, maybe the theoretic strongest race, like very, very much practically the strongest race and practically very easy to play. And if we assume that is true, and so then we're going to nerf the race in a way that's going to make it like change up and make it more difficult to play, but ultimately still playable, would we not expect a bunch of Protosses to lose in normal? Would we not expect?
I think we would. Yeah.
Is this not the exact result that like we were in theory going for?
Yeah, I mean,
so that's
I
like
come back to that a lot, but
right now is
I don't know. It's like
just to close on my point real fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say, I would say, I would imagine a lot of Protoss players aren't having fun right now, but I also would say that there's probably gaps in their knowledge of how they need to change the gameplay that they're still working on. That will, it's probably not fun to lose a lot, but this is StarCraft a bit, and like you have to sort of embrace the suck, and like you have to push through. I played a lot of late game CPPs on 2019 era, 2020 era, 2021 era. Like I pulled my hair out a lot, and it was not always fun. I have a very strong late game now, and I have a lot of fun playing late game now. And I wouldn't have been able to have that fun if I didn't go through. Like I have more fun now, knowing how much, how much effort I have gone through to play it.
Your mic is really breaking up, by the way, Zesty, if you don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I think that just sort of comes back to like what we were saying at the start of this with like we don't want Protoss to go through the same thing that Zerg went through, because like for me, like I fucking loved Zerg in like 2016 to like maybe 2018 or something like that. It was like really fun. Yeah, lots of fun to play the race, and I was also doing really well. Sure, Zerg was strong. Yeah, sure. You know, and then Zerg got a crap ton of nerfs, and it's like, me losing MMR, not the biggest deal to me. I don't really care that much about it. The thing that bothered me was I couldn't play the game how I wanted to play it anymore. You know, like, I was able to do that previously, and now I'm being forced to do something else, you know? And that's just kind of something that I think has been a consistent pattern that we've seen in StarCraft, where players just do not like being forced into doing something else. You know, like, it seems pretty consistent to me that you know, when something is too strong and then we nerf the crap out of it, like, we don't just like nerf it a little bit so it's less oppressive. We just like hit it with the fucking nerf hammer, and we just hammer it into the ground so nobody can play it anymore. And then we buff something else, and we're like, use this other thing instead. You know, like, nobody likes being told that, you know? Like, people want to be able to play the game they want to play it.
The best example I have of that is I started the game in 2018. I watched BlizzCon 2017. I saw Neeb, Ultra Late Game Mass Carrier. I played 2018, and 2018 is this PvZ, is this matchup where you do Phoenix Oracle, and there's a bind game between 2 Stargate Phoenix and Archon Drop. And you go Archon Drop third base, and Zerg is supposed to open Queen, Spore, Sumbling, Scouting. You can pressure the third if you want. And then you're supposed to go into a Roach quite quickly on low eco, and then you boom to 66 worker, and you do a big timing. And you have the option of pure Roach Ravager all in, Roach Hydra with a drop later, Roach Swarmos, which is kind of all in on high workers. And if the game stabilizes beyond that, then you get into the Broodlord and the late game and the carriers, etc. Anyway, that whole year, the matchup almost never goes late game. Or like very rarely. Like Stats gets late game because it's Stats and he just isn't killable. And Serral goes late games because he's OP as fuck in 2018. But anyway, the matchup develops, you see bailing styles come in, etc. And then in 2019, they're like, yeah, so Zerg are struggling against air units. So what if we triple nerf the carrier by removing an upgrade, which was the catapult, I think? Or it was already removed?
Catapult.
And like, remove the catapult. And I'm like, yeah, you remove the catapult. It was stupid that, you know, carriers counter corruptors because they just one-shot a corruptor by a moving. And then they're like, okay, so now that Airtos is not allowed to play almost, let's give Zerg a infested Terran that scales with upgrades and has a rocket launcher to one-shot air unit. And it's like, so now Airtos is completely unplayable, which makes Broodlords insanely broken, but we also brought back an even stupider version of the 2012 Broodlord Infestor. And then you have this stupid meta, and I remember this game vividly on King's Cove Station, King Cove. Elazer goes Fast Lurker, Mass Spore Crawler, and then he tanks his eco to 20 workers on 5 base, just to have 180 supply of Infestor Broodlord Lurkers.
Oh my god.
And whoever was the Protoss could do nothing. And then you have this setup where Zerg can't die, but it doesn't matter because they use 3 units. And he basically slowly grinded the game, and it was like completely impossible to win for Protoss, even though they took half the map, more than half the map. And I watched this. I am 3k MMR, 3.5, and I talked to a guy. I'm like, who's also platinum, and he has to play in a CTL. And I'm like, bro, you have King's Cove. Let's do this for fun. And I kid you not, he opened 2 base Roach because he doesn't know other builds. So he's playing 2 base into 3 base Protoss. He attacks an Immortal all-in. So he's behind by 1,000,000 miles, and he still does this setup with Mass Lurker, tanks his eco, goes Broodlord Infestor, and wins with 3k MMR mechanics.
Huh.
And I saw this, I'm like, okay, that's illegal. Then I won. I also played it. I also won with it. And then you end up in those games where you could just camp for no fucking reason with Broodlord Infestor. Well, no, that was stupid. We saw Rogue completely dismantle Trap with it in the most stupid game. If you want to see what 2019 looks like, you just look Trap versus Rogue, the King Cove game in GSL. It's everything that was stupid about the meta is in that game. Anyway, and then the next year we're like, okay, buff Airtos, remove Infested Terran completely, just like out of the game. And they were like, okay, we're fine now. So Blizzard can never just, like, anytime something's good, we have to like quad nerf it or quad buff it. I think that's completely idiotic.
All right.
The error the Battle Council they were tweaking rather than doing.
It's not
huge changes.
this was Blizzard patching.
People hated that as well, though. This was the point I'm making.
That's also true. But the thing is, we needed something major. And the other issue with the Protoss changes that happen is we do want to check the balance part and the fun part, but there's also the identity part of the race. And I think that's a good point that people have levered, is that if you try to bring back gateway production, outside of the fact that the game has been designed around Warpgate now being the only production way, I think it also loses a little bit of the identity of having three races that are very distinct from each other.
Yeah, Protoss having gateways using the burst production mechanic was always sort of a interesting thing about Protoss, because they kind of had a hybrid of like Terran and Zerg style production, and now they're just Terran.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would agree with that at all. Given that Brood War, there was no Warpgate, and everyone would say that there were three distinct races in Brood War as well. So
Yeah,
I
true,
don't
true.
think that you need Warpgate.
I mean, they are three distinct, but it's like
races.
It feels like walking back. If you're a Protoss and you've been playing with Warpgates your whole life, it feels like walking back. It feels like walking back in time.
That's kind of my point with it.
Even though I don't completely agree with it, because having super fast gate production is, I think, very interesting, and it's extremely underutilized.
It's just the fact that we've had it for like 14 years now. You know, like it's a really long time to have Warpgate in the game and then just remove it.
I would argue we should remove Queens from Zergs, because I think my little experience in Brood War has basically made me think that Brood War Zerg is 10 times more fun. But if you remove Queens from StarCraft 2 Zerg, you have to change so many things that I doubt it's worth it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it's like for the same reason that I don't like us doing this now, I don't like the idea of removing Queens. Anyway, I think I do want to kind of focus a little bit about the Gateway Man style. Since we have Zesty here, and he was helping Pig with his deep dive into that the other day, I thought it might be a good time to chat with this a little bit. And I do have one little bit of funny semi-not drama that I want to bring up, which was I was tuning into Hup's stream after that, and just seeing how he reacted to it, because he was in Pig's chat and was talking with Pig about it, and he was ranting about it and saying that the Zergs practicing with Pig were starstruck and playing like practice dummies and not really trying and being super passive. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Zesty.
I have no comment on so.
No worries. I understand.
But look, what I'll say is that Pigs, I kind of had I don't really feel like that the idea that Pig was going for makes a lot of sense. I actually tried to convey this to him, but it felt like the games, he was essentially playing hyper aggressively with his units, and he was gaining or losing an advantage, based on how well those units did, and then then once you gain an advantage, you can snowball it kind of however you want. Right. And if you choose to do it by making mass, zealots and throwing them out mass zealots, then you can do that, and eventually the Zerg doesn't have enough if they're behind. But if I'm ahead, then I'll just have enough, and then you start snowballing the other way. So
that's a very good point.
I would agree that, I don't know how much those games showed about any viability or balance, because it essentially, in my opinion, was ZVP as actually one of the most frustrating things about ZVP, which is it's always been decided by the very first probe shows up, and you can, as Zerg, speaking of fun unit interactions, you can die to the very first probe by getting mineral hasted to the point where you can't build a queen that you need to defend the first two adepts. So that happened when I was playing against Yo-Yo, until I, really locked in and really tried to, do clicking simulator, so I don't die to first probe. Or you can also lose, 3-4 drones to the first 2 adepts, and then, technically, you now don't have enough money to deal with the fallen oracles. You don't have enough money to deal with the fallen wave aggressions. And so Pig was playing that kind of oppressive style, which is pretty low investment for the Protoss and pretty game losing or winning for whether or not they can hold on to the Zerg. And that more or less decided the games that I won. Well, actually, I can't even say that's true. The first game I played against Pig, he killed me with his harassment, and then somehow I won the game just by somehow surviving to lurkers and doing a pretty desperate counter attacks, and somehow pulling it out. But the rest of the games kind of felt like, hey, whoever the games that I was able to defend well, I won. The games where I did not defend well, he eventually won. So from that perspective, I think that the style is fine, but it feels just like a different way to continue like ZVP, closing out an advantage that you get early on in ZVP or PvZ, I guess. Which is more or less the way the matchup has always kind of been, and why I think everyone's been on both sides feel. Because on the flip side, the Protosses, when they do finally meet a Serral who never collapses to the pressure, even though it's incredibly difficult to defend, yeah, it feels very, 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 very hopeless, because you're used to the Zergs collapse and I win, or they don't collapse and I lose, but most of the times they collapse. Yeah. And then you meet a Serral, and I imagine that feels
You're
oppressive.
used to fighting a human, and like it's a sword fight. You're used to fighting this giant armored guy and finding small cuts here and there, and he slowly collapses to the ground until you can grab a hammer and smash him in his head. And when you meet Serral, it feels like he has no armor because he just blocks everything for free, and then he punches you in the face when you grab the hammer.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying, Zesty, about being able to convert advantage is a very important point for people to understand, because it's we talk about different transitions and things being more or less effective, but at the end of the day, StarCraft is a game where the exponential advantages of being ahead will just compound on each other if you take advantage. So it's possible to take a lead and convert it into whatever you want, essentially. If it's a way that you can end the game, you could do it that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be the meta, and just because something is possible to close a game with doesn't mean that it's quote-unquote viable. You know what I mean? If you're able to get a strong enough advantage, you can close the game with pure drones. That's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say that it did feel like the Gateway Man style was a more definitive way to close an advantage. It felt more hopeless whenever I was behind, to ever get up enough units. It was very similar. Actually, I had flashbacks to CVT whenever they're playing Biomine styles. I played Biomine against Clem, and you just don't as soon as you get the very first second that you get ahead, you leverage that into getting more ahead the next year interaction, and more ahead the next year interaction.
Right.
Until eventually you literally don't have. It's I can split my army and have 5 Zerglings on either side to face his double medevac drops on either side, or I can have one army one place, and then I'll just lose everything on the other side. But that's kind of how the Mass Gateway Style felt. Very, very Terran-esque.
I feel like that speaks more to the way early game Zerg versus Protoss and Zerg versus Terran has been the past LOTV years, I will say, where Zerg has little to no pressure early game that isn't a fucking insane all-in or a cheese. So the only way you compound advantage is by defending, and that comes back to designing the race with a macro unit that's also a massive tank that can't move out. So the best play for Zerg is droning as hard as you can and defending, and the best play for the other race is pressuring with something that's also, if possible, blindly safe against all-in, while echoing extremely hard because you are assuming Zerg can't move out. And that goes back to Hellion Banshee type builds and Adept Oracle type builds where it's the default best build because if you're playing against a cheese, you can detect it through pressure and hopefully play conservative and hold, or you get your damage on a guy who's trying to eco, and then you compound your advantage and transition to whatever you want, which can be fast AoE, fast mothership, gateway man, immortal, double colossus, like, or if you're extremely far ahead, as you said, just probes, I guess. But yeah, I think it's a overall just an issue that's been compounding from the years of Zerg domination. I don't like to say domination. It's mostly a Serral domination
Yeah, it
with
was mostly a serial
like
domination.
the exception. I think Zerg has let exceptional talents thrive more than the other race, because it's a race that by default is like when I started StarCraft. I started StarCraft from a competitive Smash background, so I have zero RTS experience. I spent a week understanding how I move units with a mouse, because I'm like, why can I WASD? Like, that's where I started. And when I asked what the races did to a friend, he told me, well, you have Protoss, well, you'll win for free. You have Terran, well, you'll suffer, and you make and I'm like, okay, I don't care about how they work. And it's like, okay, so you have a race that makes military units progressively, and then you shoot people. There's a race that makes super strong stuff in waves, and then you have this race who gets a lava, and you make whatever you want. I'm like, oh, isn't this broken? Because I can choose between eco and army. And he's like, well, technically, if you're good at it, yeah. And that's the year that Serral started winning everything. But like, Zerg has this thing where, like, if you are the better player, and the game is truly, like, in patches where the game is fair, I feel like it's easier to convert an advantage just by the fact that how the race is built. Because, as you said, it's a inherently defensive early game race. So if defense is easier, you're supposed to be ahead, and then because you're ahead, you do what you want as an aggressive option.
I don't actually think defense is easier, by the way. I think it's theoretically better.
Okay, it's theoretically,
but it's not easier.
yes. That's okay. That's what I meant. Then it's, if defense is theoretically better, a race that's defensive into convert advantage by offense and win, or by eco and just outgrowing the opponent, is theoretically will just theoretically be always better. And the only way to make it bad is either you make the defense too weak, you let the opponents have so much money that they can attack while keeping up with the eco anyway, which is kind of what happened pre-patch with both Terran 3cc builds and the Stargate fast third Protoss builds, in my opinion. Or you make their units so bad that they don't get to play the game when they are supposed to have an advantage. And I guess that's kind of what was happening in earlier meta. Like, when Zerg was terrible, I guess I heard tales of like 2016 when the Ultra was broken because it had too much armor. It was like
broken.
People say it was impossible to win
armor
against in EU.
It was good, but the problem with her Terran was just that their counters were all super weak. You know, like,
so
that was really the issue. It wasn't
basically
the fact that the Ultra had 8 armor.
What I heard is they didn't know how to balance it, because in Korea they could never wait. Like, the Zergs were all dying before they got to Ultras. And in EU, the Zergs would just get to Ultras and win for free.
Yeah, that was
what was happening. At this point, I kind of want to just call a skill issue of, like, the unit is broken, but you never get there if you're not good enough.
Yeah, which is why Dark was my favorite Zerg, and will always be my favorite Zerg, because during that time he was the last Zerg standing who managed to get to Ultras. Anyway,
it's kind of a funny point.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of a funny point, because one of the things about Brood War that I really feel like we should just go back to in StarCraft 2, or just kind of, but in Brood War, like, literally everything is overpowered, like OP as fuck.
Oh yeah, and I like that design philosophy.
When everything's just like, it's like, if you look at the stats for any race, any unit, you just look at the stats for units, you're like, holy crap, this unit is busted. And it's just kind of like, when everything's busted, then like, it becomes very,
It also has the core thing of a truly eternal esport or eternal game, that it's mechanically fair and they have the advantage of, if you want to push the game, it becomes so difficult that in the end, it's truly who the better player is and not what the best race is. Because using Multilisk at 100% in that game is so incredibly difficult that most people just plateau at 80% because they have to do other stuff. And there's a guy who's going to push it to 100%. And then he's going to go crazy. But he's the only guy who can do it because he makes, like, the rest of his stuff is bad. Like, for example, the best Protoss right now in Brood War is Snow. Snow is stupid with Reaver Throttle. Like, just absurd. Nobody understands what the fuck he does. Is the only person who can do half the stuff he does with the unit. It's an entirely different unit for this. But his macro and base layout is legitimately sub top 10. It is so bad. And the thing is, Reavers are broken in PvT, are really good in PvP, and useless in PvZ unless you go to Ultra League game. And what happens to Snow is that he will murder every Terran, beat most Protoss that aren't Rain, because Rain is crazy, and then he would run into a good Zerg and get smashed. And you review the games and you're like, why are you missing macro cycles in ASL when you have 6 gateways? Like, you're fucking goddamn, you're Snow. Like, do something. So you have this game that self-balances itself by being too hard, that you can't do everything, so you have to make choices. And I think StarCraft is a little too streamlined in that way.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think an uncomfortable truth is that the best players in StarCraft 2 right now are still leaving a lot on the table on all races.
I agree, but I do think the way to balance StarCraft, I like the idea of making everything quote-unquote broken, but I wouldn't say necessarily making it good, but I would say make it harder to do, or make it more rewarding to do a hard thing. I think we should promote playstyles that are hard to play, just because it will force errors and will highlight good players, and it feels better to lose to someone who is microing something really well or is doing something really difficult than losing to someone who is making the good unit with the big numbers and then doing F2A move.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that we're probably been kind of moving in that direction a little bit with how, like, it just feels like we're encouraging more of the active styles, like Mutiling Bane, Gateway Man, Bio has been getting a lot of love lately. It kind of feels like we're already sort of moving in that direction. Anyway, yeah, I did want to move on a little bit here, though, because I had a couple questions about, I mean, this is uncomfortable for us to talk about as StarCraft 2 fans a little bit, but, like, it feels a little bit like Protosses don't even want to try the new gateways because they are saying they're, like, so bad. And then we've also got the recent news of Hero saying that he's quitting PvZ and he's going to play ZVZ instead. And I just have to, I just have to bring up, we had a crazy number of pros who were off racing as Protoss and winning tournament games in previous seasons. And, most notably Clem, who has been doing PvT instead of TvT for, like, years now. So it's like, is this a fair comparison? Because it was a very short number of months. And I was kind of disappointed to see that.
Cyril used to lose one ZVP late game a year for like 5 years, I think, straight. And one of them is to Raynor. Playing Protoss.
That's right.
In like 23 on Raduset Station.
Yeah.
So
I remember
if you're a Protoss fan and you see Hero say, I can't do it in PvZ, man, I'm going to play ZVZ, and you look at Hero and he's a crazy gambler, ZVZ is his matchup. He should play Zerg.
Yeah, I was going to say
and
that.
And it's like saying, Clem, he doesn't want to play TvT. It's because Terran is bad. No, it's because Clem, well, it can be a reason, but it's also because Clem can't fucking watch tanks for 10 hours. He wants to run around and do stuff. So let him play a matchup where he can run around and do stuff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I think it's more a testament to the player than to my race too bad to win matchup.
I'm also gonna say too, like the mirror matchups are the most volatile matchups at all in general. And so
But
when
the
you have a
ZVZ
player like Cyril,
specifically insane.
when you have a player like Cyril, it's going to be like it's actually a rock paper scissors matchup at the moment, and many different levels in many different places. And there's a lot of skill. Like you're never gonna beat Cyril, you know. But like you know, you get someone who's close to his level and like playing that rock paper scissors matchup a couple times, they're gonna start winning a couple of those games.
Yeah.
And just by virtue of they're close enough to like have that advantage mean something. And so like Hero probably is going to do better against these top Zergs in CVZ than maybe PvZ, but I don't know if that necessarily reflects on balance.
I think it's more a choice of the players, and it's technically the same argument for pros don't want to use normal gateways. It's both because they've never used them, so it feels terrible because it's like, oh, my unit don't instantly teleport somewhere I want, so it feels weird to produce units normally, and also I've been doing this forever. Can I just keep doing it? Just like Zergs, we used to run across the map with queens and click energy, and it would insta kill everything. And people were like, "Oh, that's stupid. Please stop doing that." So we just removed it from the game, and then we're like, "Okay, we'll just bring it up." And people were like, "Please stop doing it." It's just like, "Okay, we'll do it anyway. Fuck you," like, because we can do it. So I feel like Zergs have been nerfed every single year, or like something has been something was too good and judged too good because it was winning too much and it was removed. And then I feel like Zergs have been more used to their stuff being gone and adapting than other races. And I've had Zergs who just quit the game. Like I've had a Zerg who was like a GM friend who I've helped a little bit. And at some point he was really depressed about like ZVP in around 2020, 2021. And I was like, okay, you can try to play like this, play like that. And we're trying to help him. And he just said, like, he played like 3 months and he just came back to me. I was like, it's just not fun for me anymore. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And those people, you're not going to save them. Like, if the game is not fun for them, they're just not going to go for it. It's like if their fun was, like, if your fun is Brutal Infestor, well, maybe it's your fun, but it can't stay in the game because it's too unhealthy. And if it's gone and you leave the game, we can't say, oh, we'll bring back Brutal Infestor for that.
Yeah,
or those
there's always
guys,
going to be
those
people
1,000
who
guys
are fans of things that just can't stay in the game. I remember hearing people complain about the A move Cyclone being changed, and it's like, oof. If that was the thing that kept you playing StarCraft, I don't know what to tell you, buddy.
I played during that era. I was trying to learn TVT. TVT was the most degenerate matchup in the world.
Yeah.
It was literally rush to a reactor, a factory. You would make cyclones, and the mind game was who was going to stop making cyclones.
Yep.
And as soon as somebody switched, you would make 2 more cyclones, run
like the way
the
you
map
described it, I remember my Terran friends saying the exact same thing. Where they're just like, it's a game of chicken to see who stops making cyclones first.
Maru from GSL, every early game is one factory making cyclones, and they're watching each other. And one guy lifts the factory, and the other guy's like, holy shit, I'm going to kill him in 20 seconds. Because he just makes 2 more cyclones and go kills them.
That's not a good sign.
If this is what keeps you playing, like, get the fuck out. It's the same thing with, like, I love Swarm Host, but if Swarm Hosts are good, if Swarm Hosts are meta, the game is in a bad place. And, like, even if I love them, as long as I get to play them, sometimes I'm happy, but I don't, like, I know that it's a bad thing if it is viable, if it's, like, every game you play Swarm Hosts. Because inherently it's insanely unfun to play against.
I love the Swarm Host as like a purpose-built tool that I use to dismantle turtle players, and that's the only thing I use it for.
It is, it is the thing that outlames the lane player. It's like,
yes,
if you want to turtle and play a single player, if you want to play
two can play at that game. I only need one unit to do it.
Make the war unit, and
yeah. Yeah, I think these are all good points.
Is it concerning that the Protoss don't want to try? Yes. Is it concerning
Yeah.
that Hero is switching? I don't think so. Because Hero should play what he thinks gives him the best chance and something that fits his style. I think it's more of a stylistic thing than a Protoss can't do it. It's me with Protoss, I can't do it. We have that a lot in Smash Bros. Where there've been a lot of players who are like, I don't believe in this matchup personally. Like Peach Puff, I can't do it. Like I'm get out range, I struggle. So I will play another character. Is it because the character is bad? Maybe, but it's more about this player can't do it because of the way they play.
Right.
I think the math.
So I'm less concerned about hero switching and more. It's more of a problem if the Protoss are not having fun. But I think the Protoss also should give it a shot.
I think the mass exodus of Protoss players, like if we talk about the top 3 Protoss players in the last year or so, we could say Zaun, Classic, and Hero, right? Like these are our top 3. Mm-hmm. And you can say Clem, whatever, like, yeah, Max Packs, like, yeah, it's sort of the same thing. Like we've got these 4 players, and Hero has decided that he's going to play Zerg. Classic is moving a little bit more towards Brood War. Zaun is doing real life stuff, and Max Packs is just really struggling in general. Like Hero was the guy who brought around quick third nexus, or popularized quick third nexus into Blink in PvZ, and that was like the gold standard for a long time. He was the person that kind of guided Protoss away from the let's spam a bunch of void rays and make the game really unfun for everyone else. And like that really has a massive knock on, because if you're like me, or even if you're your average Protoss player, you don't have anyone to look up to, because Max Pax's style is too hard for you to play. Hero, I know Hero's like he can be an idiot when he plays and he makes some questionable decisions, but like his contributions in terms of Oracle and Blink has been really valuable, and I'm scared as a Protoss player that we don't have that sort of like leadership, and we don't have that establishment of a gold standard. If arguably our best player has decided that he wants to avoid like the matchup that we're all struggling with, and like this kind of compounds an issue that has been around for a long time, and there's not a lot of Protoss content, not a lot of Protoss coaches that are willing to like put themselves out there and sort of like bite a bullet and say like, you know, try this build or like try this style, and because they don't want to go wrong, right? Like Groovy and Zesty have been doing an absolutely amazing job at Ladder Legends trying to figure stuff out for us. I've been pestering Groovy for PvP and PvZ builds for ages, and Zesty's been helping me dealing with some specific Zerg builds. But outside of these two, who are absolutely working their asses off, Protoss players have got DNS. Like, who else? Like, we've got DNS to look at. Like, Halston doesn't make guides anymore. He doesn't do any of those like he did a couple years ago, but doesn't anymore. So, and DNS posts, like his videos are like his build, learn it. And you don't get to develop an understanding of where the matchup is at. You don't know what to do when a Zerg chucks 30 Hydras at you at whatever minute mark. You don't have a clue. And a lot of the content around Protoss for a long time has been learn this build order, execute this build order, and you'll win games. I personally don't understand where the gateway change fits in and what I should do and how I should respond to certain things. And unfortunately, I think that's probably going to stay as it is for a while, because and that's also going to get compounded by the fact that our best player is deciding not to play the matchup anymore.
Yeah. He touched on something.
I would push back a little bit on that.
Go ahead.
If I may.
Yeah.
We've been told for 8 years when Zerg complains about anything, we've been told play like Cyril. And I've also seen the Terrans say, look at the win rate, it's impossible, while Maru is winning 8 GSLs. And when you say, but Maru is winning, it's like, yeah, but Maru doesn't, because he's Maru. And then when the Clam starts winning everything, it's like, yeah, but he doesn't count because he clicks very fast, you know?
Yeah.
So like, if those guys don't count, but the 4 top Zergs count, when you have Dark, who overmakes units like an idiot, but has insane micro, so he can get away with it. You have Cyril, who sees the entire map for free because he's insane and can just instantly make crazy good strategic decisions. You have Rogue, who is the most... He gambles with a loaded dice, is the only way I can explain Rogue. He just says, I'm going to do this because fuck you, and it works anyway. Like, he's the guy who will crush a Terran push, see 50 Marines and make 20 drones and start a hive and 3 upgrades. And it works out anyway. Because the guy is scared to attack for the next minute. And then you have... And the last guy you're going to say, yeah, but Raynor. It's like, well, Raynor is also a clan. He's a guy who clicks faster than you. So, like, if our models... They have different models, but they all are impossible to do. And then you look... But I guess we are lucky because we have Lambo, who's probably just one of the smartest player in all of StarCraft, who makes educational content. And then we have Solar, who is the most relatable Zerg in the world. Every time I have a new player, I tell them to watch Solar, because Solar doesn't have a superpower. Solar plays solid, he never overdrones, he goes for the killing timing when he can. And if you watch Solar play ZVP when he was really successful, he would cut his workers around 50 to 66, find a timing, hit the timing, nail it, and he wins or not. And he doesn't get to be Rogue and go hive at 5 minutes while flipping Zerglings everywhere. He doesn't get to be Raynor and play PvP. He doesn't get to be Cyril and see the whole map and go late game and win anyway while being behind. So I agree that it feels bad to not have a star or someone to look up to. But I think it's a bigger problem that you don't have an educational guy.
Yeah, because we've just had 2 giant changes chucked on top of us, and like every race has 8 workers. Yeah, that's fair. But we've had a major production rework at the same time.
Also, and then also like, well, I just have to jump in here because like what you're talking about with the lack of like Protoss role models here. Like, I mean, this also definitely ties directly into, you know, I hate having to bring this point up over and over again, but all of the retirements that we had from Korean Protosses, like right after Kespa ended, it's like, you know, or Kespa's like StarCraft 2 teams ended, you know, the influx of new Korean players was like 0 after that point, right? So it's like whoever we have that's Korean is who we have. Yeah, I know there's a few, but like you get my point.
Not Protoss.
Yeah, yeah, but they're not Protoss. Yeah, but my point being that like the river of new Korean players that was just like constantly flowing, like that kind of ended like pretty rapidly, right? And then at the same time, we had like a lot of Protosses getting called for their 2-year mandatory military service, right? And Terran and Zerg just did not have the same impact from that. There were like a few of the top Terrans and Zergs who definitely had, you know, their military service, right? And a lot of them retired, you know, Innovation in particular, right? TY, another great example. You know, but then at the same time, for Terran and Zerg, we had Cyril, we had Raynor, and we had Clem. You know, all these people rising up on the EU side, right? And then we also had Max Packs who wouldn't play in offline tournaments for the Protoss side. So it's like, we already were in a situation where Terran and Zerg had way more people to learn from and take as an example, right? But then, like, so Protoss was already struggling to find role models. And now we're at this point, and, you know, this leads into the question I wanted to ask here. It's like, does it even matter if the warp gates are viable, or if the fast gateways are viable, or if they're good, or if this warp gate design was a good choice for the patch? Like, does that even matter if there's no Protosses left in the game? You know what I mean? Like, if they all stop playing, does it matter if this is a good choice or not? You know, like, if they're not going to play the game, like, I mean, the community's kind of shattered at that point, you know? So, like, should we even be trying this at all?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't feel like you should negotiate with terrorists, right? Like, if people are going to refuse to play the game.
I love that you're saying this. Sorry, go ahead.
like, I mean, it's very entitled. It sounds very entitled to me. Like, if something happens and you don't like the game, then you're allowed to leave, sure. But like, that does like, and if all the proton, like, I do get a massive sense of like entitlement from like whenever like these sort of questions of like, you know, the game owes me something, or I have to, you know, like if I don't get to play like this, then we're not going to play. It's like, okay, well, then, you know, that's your right to leave, you know. But like ultimately, I think that there's still enough Protoss, like there's still enough people trying to put out like stuff like, look, the diamond level Protosses, there are guides out to help you, you know, be successful in diamond and even rank up to master. Like, you don't need, you know, 6.7k, like 6.7k MMR games have very little impact on like even 5k MMR games. Like what Cyril is doing when he plays like Brainer or Max Packs, you know, they're not playing ZVP or ZVC or CVT. They're playing Cyril versus Max Packs, right? It's a completely different matchup because these two guys have played against each other so much that, like, you know, I've tried to look at Cyril and like understand why he does the things he does against some players, and it's not understandable because they're not playing the matchup; they're playing the player.
I've had that experience a number of times where like I'll be looking at a game and I'm like, why are you not worried about this thing that could be totally blindsiding you and you're not checking for it at all? And it's like, if you were to ask them, the answer would probably be something like, well, because I know this guy and he never does that. So I'm not worried about it. You know, I've played him enough. I know he never does that to me. So I'm not going to worry about it. You know, and that's just
Like
something that is
like
totally different than a matchup.
And it wasn't very good, and
Yeah.
he did it once and it wasn't very good, and I reactively dealt with it, you know?
I think
Yeah.
one of the best example of this,
I think that, like,
Banelings in the past 2 years in ZV Clam are not viable. Banelings are late game unit exclusively. The amount of players you've seen people, even in Diamond, people have been telling me don't make Banelings against 2-on-1 because it's too easy to micro and click the Baneling. And it's true in Diamond now. A Diamond player can click like 4 slow Banelings off creep. At least at my like Diamond Belly Master level, right? So it's better to make 30 Zerglings and a bunch of Queens. But if you get to Clem level, he clicks speed Banelings on creep. If you don't have 40 Banelings, you don't get to play him. So what happens is, if you look at all the top Zergs who play him consistently, they stopped making Banelings. They started to rush Carapace, go fast and faster, play Roach styles. They've played anything that isn't Banelings in the mid game, because if you play Banelings against Clem, he clicks 5 Banelings, picks up, leaves. Clicks 5 Banelings, picks up, leaves. Clicks 5 Banelings, picks up, leaves. And then he slowly grinds you down and kills you, because you've invested too much in a unit that he won't let you use. So I agree with that thing of like, it's nice to have an inspiration that's a top players, but you should never be like, I will play like Cyril. You should look at what Cyril does and be like, what's a good thing I can implement in my game? And for example, implementing stuff like spreading Zergling consistently, the way he scouts with his Overlord, maybe the way he positions queens, like when Raynor was starting to do like double hotkey queens to like cover 2 areas at the same time. Right. That's something you can try to implement if you're around Master Plus. Because you're like, okay, I'm dying to Hellions, but it's a good idea to split my queens consistently and maybe put them on different hotkeys. That's the type of stuff you can implement. You don't, but maybe not all the way. I've started to do it by manually boxing, and it helped my win rate a little bit in PvZ. There's stuff you can copy, but trying to just be like, I agree with the fact that like, being like, I will play like Cyril is completely insane. You will not. And almost anyone that's in the top 10, you can almost not look at. Also, it's not going to change your fun, whether you can do the Cyril build or not.
Very true,
and
yeah. I think like the purpose of following a pro player build should really just be like, if you think it's a build that you can actually achieve to an effective level. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at it and you're like, there's no way I could possibly do that, like, don't try it. You know? Find an easier build.
I think you should have more content also that deconstructs things to core concepts more than this new hero build is crazy. Do the hero build.
Yeah,
It should more be
Totally.
hero has been doing this cool new style. What is it? Why does it work?
yeah.
And it's like, well, he gets an
The
oracle
why does it work part
early
is
and then
something
goes
that I think
for
is
fast bird. How does he do it? Why does he skip the base? Well, you skip the second gateway in the wall because you have a second oracle coming. You have 3 adepts, so you're safe. You can panic wall against a link flood, and your nexus will have more HP, so it won't die to a link flood. And that's a core concept that's good, and that will always apply no matter the patch. Because if there's a new patch and nexus is 500 minerals, well, that build doesn't work because the core thing that made it work doesn't work anymore because of timings.
yeah.
So you're not lost because, oh, I can't do my fast third build anymore. You're like, can't do my fast third build because of this, but I can adapt it in this way.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
I do
important
think
for people to understand.
more stuff around explaining core concept is important. And Lambo used to do that a lot. Now it's on his Patreon, I think. It was less about do this build. He had stuff that was like do this build because it gets views. But he had stuff like I don't know, I'm confusing him with a French guy who used to do coaching, but he used
like
to
the
do
game
coaching
plan
like
videos.
yeah, game plan videos. Or I had a French guy who made an entire video on the importance of early spending lavas, and he was comparing Solar with I don't remember who. I think Lambo. Yeah, with Lambo against Innovation, who, as we all know, does one build. So it was the same game twice, and he was showing how Solar was like 5 supply or 10 supply ahead at 6 minutes just because he spends his lava faster.
Yep.
And stuff like this, if you're Zerg and you learn this, it works no matter the patch because you always have a lava spawning. And you're not lost anymore because it wasn't like, oh, learn the solar build and then something changes and you can't do it anymore or it doesn't work anymore. So I do think it's a little bit, it's a cop out because it's like, please make better content. And, you know, I'm not a Pro Loss player that's good enough to teach people. But it doesn't help that you both have less top players to look up to and your teachers are more make build than explaining core concepts. So I hope that's something Ladder Legend touches on, and that's on the couple lessons I've followed. It's the type of questions people get. So I think that's
Ladder Legends is the only real place for Protoss players at the moment where you can ask a question and they won't just give you do this, do that, do this. They actually give you, and they try to coach for the understanding. I think one of my particularly biggest gripes with, you know, I spoke about DNS earlier, and I think DNS is one of these creators that is a do this build and not much else. Like, oh, this is how I play it. Like,
well, the thing is, it's what gets clicked. Sadly,
it's
what gets clicked. But for a guy who's master, like high diamond, trying to get into master, it is the type of stuff that's helpful. I know he does coaching, but it's paid coaching, so less people are going to see it.
Yeah,
and that's the type of content you would get if you talked with him. But then
you're going to get to 4.5, and then your build's not going to work anymore. So then, what do you do after that point? Like, you get stuck, and then you end up in cycles where you follow these limited amount of builds that are available from not many creators that are basically just doing things for clicks because that's what gets you money when you're a creator and gets you like attention to your page. And like a DNS brought out this Glaive Adept, like Tempest Mothership Rush, you know, like something like that, right? And you do this build, and then you realize that, I do it, and I get to 4.5, great, and then it doesn't work anymore. And then you're either looking for the next build, but what you could have done is you could have instead tried to learn a bit more about the base understanding of the rules of the game, what you can do at certain points and what you can't do, and then kind of build your playstyle off of those rules. So like, what do I like to do, and what's okay in the current meta, like what's actually viable for me to still play, and then like things that follow those kind of game rules if you want to win the game, and then also build from there instead of like, you know, it's like your prescription. Like at the moment, I feel like I'm just getting prescribed this adept build, this charge build, but what if I don't want to play adept? What if I don't want to play charge? And what if I do play these builds and I get to a certain point where Zerg players are just too good? They deal with it effectively. What do I do after that point? I've never
Yeah,
learned
or a patch
about what to
changes
do.
your warp kits and you don't
Yeah,
get
or
it
like
just doesn't work.
a more extreme example. Like I used to play
So-
a DT drop, for example, and this
Yeah,
worked
and that
against
build just
players up
doesn't
until
exist
like
anymore.
4.9k. Like I beat a 4.9k player when I was 4k with a DT drop, but that just doesn't exist anymore. You know?
It sounded like Zesty wanted to
Yeah,
jump in
so
there.
I guess I'll. Yeah. So let me know if there's too much background noise.
That's fine.
But there's the thing that I wanted to kind of point out was that, or kind of like gone that is that I don't believe that a build doesn't work at 4.5k, and I say that having done 27 Link Bane all in exclusively in all matchup to 5400 MMR. The point where players were having to quickly counter. They would have to do the most defensive build, like at the top GM level. They were having to like do specifically. I had to kind of notice when they were hard countering the build, like really hard changing their build to hard counter the build, like going centuries behind. And that's what made me eventually okay. I guess I got to back off on this. But execution is king in StarCraft, and so like to say that a build isn't going to work at 4.5k MMR, I mean you can figure out how to like use your units more effectively, like be more decisive, like split them up slightly more, pull your, how do you, even though your opponent's only 2 bases, how do you split his attention? It's possible, right? It might be harder, but it's possible. And so
When are you
for
gonna get
me,
that from
in
a
my
DNS
coaching, one of the
video,
things, like, you
I agree
won't,
with that.
and that's fair.
You won't
but
get
I
it from
guess,
videos
right?
that say
If you don't want to pay for
explain the
coaching,
build. You need private coaching,
but I guess
or you need people
this
who
is,
make videos on concepts. Or you can
that's
think for
fine,
yourself, but
and
it's harder.
yeah, I mean, I guess I would try to encourage people to think themselves, and I'd also try to like anytime I do. I mean, all of the replay analysis that I do are, and I'll do replay analysis on, anyone who posts them for me. That's, but right now it's only Zergs, but all of them, I really try to like talk about, look, you need to spend your money more, of course, but to like, what is mechanically, like the way you improve is you identify the bottleneck in your gameplay. And like you identify what is holding you back, and it's rarely going to be the strategy that you chose, and it's almost always going to be, we're floating money, or we don't know what the opponent's doing, so we can't respond. Well, now that we know what the opponent's doing, we weren't floating money, but then we spent all of our attention figuring out what the opponent's doing, and then now we're floating money. And so like tightening the execution loop, like identifying where the bottle, like it's you always need to have your money spent. You always need to know what your opponent's doing, and if you do those 2 things, then you're going to win. You're going to beat a lot of people in the game of StarCraft. And so if you always go and critically look at your own replays and figure out what are the bottlenecks that's preventing me from spending my money or from knowing what my opponent's doing, then you'll be able to discover for yourself these like fundamental principles.
Yeah,
And of course, I will do my best to help people out, but paid
also
coaching is
think-
obviously the quickest, easiest way.
It's underspoken because a lot of the coaching, I know it must be true, and it is true, that most of the replays, people reviewing my replays, a lot of the time it's, yeah, spend your money better, you're getting supply block, mechanics. But like, as a new player, or even as a long-time player, if you don't have a framework or an idea of where you're going, it is so much harder to spend money because you never know what to click. And
Yeah, I completely agree.
That's something that's
True.
very underspoken. The problem is there's too many people who are like, how do I beat carriers? And there's one guy who's going to say they shouldn't get there. There's one guy who's going to say spend your money, and there's one guy who's going to say play like sale roll. But like the actual response is everything at once. The actual response is make corruptors with this upgrade, rush into it this way, so the money you're floating, you should invest it into the corruptors because that's the right strategy. And you shouldn't let them get there, as in you should spend your money in a way that hits a timing too early for them to stack. And I think it's something that could help and should be used more. is teaching fundamental concepts and having an overall framework for the matchup. In every time there's somebody that starts playing Zerg and is like or on Platinum, etc., I will watch a replay. Most of the times I have to tell them to stop injecting and spending lavas because they inject, they have 50 lavas floating. But I will always give them a framework that's like, how do you early defend? Try to hit a timing that's measurable so you see yourself improving. And that's your late game plan. And I always give them all of the parts. I'll say you will get late game like 10% of the game. It's not your goal. But if you get there, do this so you don't feel helpless. Or if you have an advantage in the mid game, go for it because it will close the game better. And I think it's something that's not talked about enough. A lot of the time, I've seen too many coaching sessions that just ends at fixed mechanic. But spending your money doesn't, like telling someone to spend his money if he doesn't know what to spend it on, in my opinion, is basically pointless.
Yeah, I agree.
Because to you, it makes sense to be like, oh, just get another base, make tech, put static defense,
No.
add more production. But you should tell people that, and that's where you're going. Like you're on the road to get to free base storm timing, and the free base, and after that, what's after that? Well, it's a fleet beacon, it's a fourth bait, it's static defense. Why do you make the static defense? Because you're stretched out. Where you get the mothership, because it's a super broken shield unit that will make your ground almost invincible and force a giant investment from the Zerg. And that's something that's very under talked about. And there's also fundamental stuff about like warpins, having the warpin in your mind, etc.
So I completely understand. I've had a lot of the same things you're talking about. Like if you don't know where you're going, then it can feel very. It's like I know I need to spend my money, but what do I spend my money on? You know, totally get it. Which is why I advocate for a lot of constraints in like the way that you play, and like I advocate for like if you want to become a good macro player, you need to learn how to all in. You need to learn how to all in effectively, because ultimately you need to build your skill to feel what it feels like to spend your money well. And to do that, like since you can't know all the situations, you need to come up with a game plan, and you need to be like, look, I'm going to go to this drone count, I'm going to make these units, and I'm going to try to use them as effectively as possible to kill the opponent. And then it doesn't end at the first attack. While I'm attacking, I'm still making units. I'm still attacking. And even a lot of times, you'll win the game not by the first attack, but because the opponent has been thrown off their game plan and their spending will balloon. But if you learn how to keep your spending down, then you'll still win. Now, this isn't, like, what people get it wrong is this isn't the end goal of my coaching style, right? But this is you need to learn how powerful your units are, how powerful your drone counts are, how much you're leaving on the table. And once you can feel that intuitively, we can start to see, you know how hard it is to kill carriers with drop queens? It's pretty hard, right? Okay, hold on. We're going to actually make it a lot easier by saying we're going to add in one little branch in your gameplay where whenever you scout the fleet beacon, you're going to drop a spire and you're going to make corruptors instead. But I still want you spending that money, right? And so, like, progressively adding on, like, focusing on, like, let's remove your strategic options. You're going to do the strategically wrong thing, but it's going to be fast, right? You're going to know, like, I can make lings, I can make banes, I can make roaches, I can make queens. Like, that's it, right? Like, that's what I do. And then it becomes, hey, by the way, you know that if you add a spire here, then your game gets easier, rather than a lot of times when people say, like, oh, you're going to add a Viper here, your game gets easier because you throw a parasitic bomb. A lot of times when you tell them, like, what's the answer to these mass void rays? Oh, you got to make fungals and you got to make parasitic bomb. And they go, oh my God, spellcasters, like, that sounds so complicated, I can't. But if they've been dealing with, like, well, you have to attack the carrier, you have to attack the void rays and then back off when they charge, and you have to do whatever, and they start to realize how, like, hopeless this game is. And then you go, but you don't have to play it like that. You have fungals, and you can just fungal them, and then you can add a parasitic bomb, and then they all die, and they go, holy crap, this is so much easier. That's like when you start to add strategic complexity, you start to remove how hard the game is, and that's like, so that's like the roadmap for how I advocate for play. Constrain your gameplay, all in, get the apps, like, try to, like, swindle wins that you're supposed to lose by maximizing the effectiveness of your units, maximizing the effectiveness of your macro. And then once you're just like, man, I've optimized and I've milked the most out of all these as all I can, and I went to someone else and I replay reviewed, and they didn't tell me, they didn't give me the feedback of you need to macro better. The only thing they could say is, you know, it'd be a lot easier if you made this unit. Then you can make that unit.
Totally agree. I think that's great coaching methodology there. All right, so we've been chatting for quite a while here, and I think it's probably about time to close this out. So I got one last question here for you guys. Let's try to be a little bit brief here, but so it's been a couple weeks with no new updates now, and BlizzCon is around the corner. There's some rumors that we're gonna get a patch after BlizzCon. If that's the case, what are we hoping to see from that patch? Are you guys hoping for like a full revert, a partial revert, more changes that are different? You know, like what are we hoping for? Just kind of curious what you guys feel about that.
I don't want to say this without sounding insane, but I'd either give me 12 workers or the warp gate back. Just purely from like the fact that the two changes on top of each other has been incredibly difficult to deal with and to adapt to. So I mean, like we're talking idealistic world, like I'd love to go back to 12 workers, or I'd like to have my old gateway back, basically.
I think that's a pretty good sentiment that a lot of people would echo.
It's gonna sound like I believe in Santa, but there we go. I want a patch. I think we go back to 12 workers because it's a meta we understand, and it's a game flow we understand, and it also shuts up the absolute insufferable people who would think 8 worker ruined the game. And despite it, like whatever, like I think it's the same. The 8 workers doesn't change the game that much. It just makes it hard to balance everything because we don't know how to. So I would just go back to 12. It was a stable meta. Most people like 12. The game flow was better. I don't have to rock, paper, scissors, EVZ. Let's fucking go. So we do that. And then I would like 2 things. Addressing stupid, retarded stuff that hasn't been addressed for the past 3 years, which is, in my opinion, ZVP late game being absurdly difficult at low levels, and late game PvP also, like the general idea of like basically all the problems that we had before, which is ZVP felt like a giant mountain to climb as a Zerg and you couldn't do anything, and then you would lose in late game, and TVP looked like the dumbest matchup in the world, where I think some units have too much map control at some points in the game, and I would like to balance this out a little bit. So basically, I would like Zerg early game to threaten a little bit more, so stuff that massacres links to just go down a little bit, so you can't just run around like a insane person, and the other way around. In like mid-game PvT, like mines should have something, should have more impact, so Terran isn't like has to close off like it's World War Z because Zealots are insane. And then in late game PvZ as well, Terran should be allowed to be on the map without 180 supply and planetaries covering it. So something to address the problem of sometimes one race has an insane, absurd map control that it cannot be challenged. And I think it should never be that way. It should not be 50-50, of course, every time. It should be like 60-40. It shouldn't be like, if Terran is off the map, Ultra Fungal blows you up and you can't do anything about it. As well as the other way around. If Terran has 180 supply and like 4 battle cruiser, like mass ghosts, etc., and he just wipes out your army, I think that's also stupid. So like stuff to balance this would be ideal in my opinion for me.
Cool. Zesty, what would you like to see?
Look, I'm anti-patch in general, not like this patch, but like I like games to stay the same. Like I like the games. I feel like that there's always hidden resources that are yet to be found, and there's interactions and stuff that can be pushed level. So I really like optimizing and taking things. And the more stuff changes, the more I have to relearn. So I was really anti going to 8 workers because I knew it was going to involve a lot of really unfun parts of like relearning things like when do you take bases, when do you do this. However, one of the things I did realize as we go to the 12 to 8 workers is that I did get a better understanding of economies in general, and just how like the underlying how stuff works in StarCraft. Because I had to go back to the basics and relearn and think about when is the right time to take a base. Like why is a hatchery before a pool like necessarily good or bad? Like what are the advantages and disadvantages? And so I was able to get more perspective on optimizing because we did the change. So I'm kind of like in retrospect, I'm kind of enjoyed that we did the change, and I think it was useful because it helped me become better at analyzing and learning about StarCraft. So I would be very upset that they went back to 12 workers, just because I think it's a very weak move to do. I think that I'm not interested in placating people that want to this argument about 8 workers killed. I agree, it didn't really change that much. It changed some, and you had to learn you had to redo a lot of understanding about what builds what makes good build and this sorts of things, and ultimately it's kind of painful work, but that's kind of why we play StarCraft. So I'm not really interested in going backwards. We made changes, and either, as always, I would like them to not do anything. I don't care what the state of the game is. I want to be able to figure out what the game's at and figure out the hidden resources that we weren't aware of. Or I'm starting to think that maybe if they want to keep patching, I'd like to see them just be crazy and just keep going crazy. Just keep doing things, surprise us all.
Give me at least 5 range.
The one thing that I would like is I would like the patch notes to accurately reflect the changes, because there's nothing more infuriating than the patch notes telling me that something is true and something is not true. For instance, the workers, the SCVs you could click on, and they somehow broke that to where now you cannot reliably click on the workers and have your unit attack them and follow them.
Oh,
anymore.
really? Interesting.
Yep. And it just kind of got ghost broken, and no one mentioned it, and that's it. It's just not in the game anymore. And there was a game that I played where I clicked the worker, and I went back and it didn't do it, and I lost the game, and I was a little infuriated by that, just because I felt lied to. So the one thing that I want to see from the patch notes moving forward, or from the patch moving forward, is I want them to be well tested to do what they say they're going to do. Not tested for balance per se, but well tested that they're not buggy in implementation and that they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Pretty fair ask.
Sadly, feels ambitious.
I don't know about that. Blizzard's
I also
a
agree
multi-dollar
on the-
company.
I also agree on the fact that 8 workers, 12 workers, I honestly don't.
Honestly, I think the
kind of
changing
enjoy the lower
town
worker
hall and,
pace.
the supply you get was a bigger change.
Yeah. But technically you have to do that.
Had to relearn all the
Although
numbers.
you don't care, you could
Yep.
just start people with blind supply.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I think this was a good discussion. It's obviously we're not gonna be able to dig to the center of this or discover any truth that's gonna fix the situation, but I think it's important for us to talk about, and I haven't seen a lot of people trying to honestly talk about this. It feels like people are either complaining super hard or saying that people shouldn't be complaining and stop whining. And I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So glad that we were able to get on and chat and go through this a little bit, and I hope you all enjoyed sharing your thoughts as well.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Happy to have you guys on in the future if you'd like, but I think that is going to be it for today. So I want to say thanks to anybody who is watching in chat or in the future on YouTube. If we missed anything that you feel like we want to address in the future, leave a comment, let us know, and we'll catch you all